Good morning, and thank you for coming to the Finance Committee meeting of the school board. Today, we'll be going over the Operations Department, Facilities Maintenance, Transportation budgets and for 2021. And I'm going to hand it off to, before I say that, I'm going to remind everyone that we're recording this meeting so that it can be used by people who cannot attend today or in the future. And I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Copeland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and welcome to everyone. This is the first in a series of budget presentations by the administration for the public and the board. The budget process actually never stops. We'll vote on the budget, the board will vote on the budget in June, but the next year's budget, the 22-23 budget will already have been started. The administration really gears up in August and September, and then presents for the cabinet in November. And the budget process continues through to really, it won't end even with these, though there may be some adjustments. But the purpose of these meetings is really to give the board an opportunity to get in the weeds and to see and question and be comfortable with the recommendations of the administration. So there will be, I think, what do we do? 5, Vic?
4.
4 presentations. This is the first, and Mr. Lill is in charge of operations. Are you going to start, Jim, or is Mr. Pitts?
I'll start, Mr. Copeland. Thank you. And it's also given me a chance to switch over and share my screen. So I get an affirmative that the PowerPoint is visible.
Looks good.
Thank you. Mr. Pitts, Ken Pitts, our Assistant Director of Operations, will take the first part of the presentation. He'll give you a description of our daily maintenance, custodial, grounds, building maintenance, which we call utilities and building maintenance. I'll take a couple of slides where we will present our ongoing restoration and replacement projects throughout the district in order to keep our facilities up to date and current. That's part of projects that are funded through a capital reserves system. And Mr. Aldous Vilsons, the Supervisor of Transportation, will be presenting the specifics regarding our transportation on a daily basis and also the associated costs. So with that, Mr. Pitts has the floor.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to let you take a peek behind the curtain of operations and transportation. Start with the organizational chart. Under the director, Jim Lill, operations is kind of broken into a facility side and a transportation side. Under the facility side, we have a grounds department led by Bob Schultz. I'd like to refer to him as Gumby because he's very green and very flexible. Then under safety, security, and custodial is Dennis Witt and John Cush. During this last year, Mr. Witt, I think, has been on nearly every committee involved with everything, pandemic or otherwise. He's been the everyman this year. And lastly, on the building side is Chris Schaefer, head of utilities and building maintenance. He's our energy warrior and our indoor air quality expert. Moving over, we see the transportation side, which Mr. Vilsons will cover in detail later. And last is project manager under Gary Musial, handles most of the higher end projects, especially the new middle school, which we'll talk about further. Next slide, please. Our facilities, we currently have 10 schools, same as we did last year. Just notable in the middle schools, we have a third school in construction. That's not really a surprise to the board members, but for the public, we are expanding. 15 separate buildings, a lot of other operations behind the scene that a lot of people don't see. a wide range of acreage we have, and extensive natural grass and 2 artificial athletic fields. Those will expand also with the middle school. Next slide, thank you. This is just a graphical representation to kind of get an understanding that if we took the 1.8 million square feet that we currently have and laid it out on the campus of Harriton, it would pretty much encompass the entire campus. Next year, when we add another 200,000 square feet, and we're over 2 million, actually that square will more than cover the entire campus of Harriton. That's the extent of how big of an operation that we have. Next slide, please. There's just a few photos for the board to look at in terms of buildings and grounds. Obviously, snow clearing this year, we had a little bit more of a normalized winter than we had the previous years. But we had some other new and exciting things. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you see a food distribution setup that we supported this year while we were shut down over the summer, and has actually continued all the way through the school year. And on the bottom right, I just want to give kudos to the core of Team Tent. Although all of the buildings, maintenance, and grounds people have worked on establishing a tent city throughout the district, that was the core group that did most of the work. So kudos to them. Next slide, please. This is just a partial list of the things that we do. It involves the buildings, regulatory aspects, inside, outside the building. It's really a broad list. And it's really hard to, in a single slide, encompass all the things that we touch. But basically, if it's not education, if it's not feeding students or not transporting them, then the operations side of the house has their fingers on it. Next slide, please. In reality, though, all the things that we did on the previous slide is basically to support the education, the activities, and the main focus of the district. We are a support function. We provide the guardrails in terms of safety, in terms of making sure things function and don't conflict with each other, and keep everything within the guardrails of good financial practices. But primarily, we are here to serve the customers, which are the building teachers and administration and the students. Next slide, please. Just a rundown of our overall, our specific maintenance side of the building. We are full up in terms of all the positions being filled, except as you see in the bottom, we have not filled the 2 engineer interns. COVID year has been a challenge for trying to get people to come in to fill those spots. And we've been doing a lot of those functions in-house, but still plan to do something in the future to get that additional support. Next slide, please. Under custodial services, here's a great picture on the left-hand side of one of our custodians using the ionizing sanitizers. These are the backpack sprayers that we use throughout the district and through transportation. This is Gloria basically sanitizing a nurse suite. We also try to do a lot of automation. We see a ride-on scrubber. And the custodial staff has been very proactive about moving in, moving out, and from the beginning of the pandemic being the support for technology, for food service, for all these other aspects that we kept going during the year. Next slide, please. These are pretty much the same things that we've done in the past. I would say during the last year, we've just done them with more vigor and more focus and more attention. The bottom line of this slide, the custodial staff has been the front line in the pandemic response. Them, along with maintenance, after we closed down for 3 days last year, they've been supporting the buildings, they've been supporting the functions, they've been supporting the remote setup we did last year. They have really been on the front lines and doing a great job throughout the whole year. Next slide, please. In terms of custodial staffing, we are pretty much filled up. There's been some turnover that we've got. We have a very good depth of substitutes that we can pull from. So Generally, the custodial staff stays up to speed the whole time. And that's been important this year because of all the tasks that we've asked them to do. Next slide, please. Getting into the budget itself, broken into the three major portions. Personnel cost, nearly 3/4 of the budget, is the biggest introduction. Broke out utilities because utilities is something that the department has a strong focus on and tries to be the best stewards of both energy and the finances related to it. It gives us the most flexibility in terms of some of the behaviors we do to try to keep those costs down as other costs rise. The remainder of the budget, services and supplies, represents another $5 million. Next slide, please. Part of the budget includes an overtime budget. These are for unforeseen events, bad weather like the snow clearing I highlighted earlier, and school activities. There have not been a lot of school activities this last year, but they are picking up. A lot of what we budget for gets reimbursed if it's outside activities, but that did not happen in the last year. So it was not a wash in, wash out, really had no impact. And generally, we need to do a little bit of overtime to support the start of the school year in September. 10 weeks seems like a long time at the beginning of the summer, and by the end of the summer, it's gone, and all the things you want to get done need to get squeezed in towards the end. Next slide, please. Turning back to utilities, we've got very good trend lines in this. Some of it from the electrical side, you see a good drop off, but that may be reflective of the last 3 months of last year. We did not use a lot of air conditioning occupying the building, so that was a good saving. Natural gas was generally flat, and that is very affected by the weather. Next slide, please. We focus on building automation systems, trying to turn things down, turn them back. We do peak load management to keep our costs low. I just wanted to note on this, in the past, we've done broad demand response across all of our buildings. We have backed that off to just the high schools now. The reason for that is we've done such a good job on our peak load contribution for the other buildings that it's not profitable to do that. We do still participate in Act 129, which is a voluntary system where we normally would turn back to control our peak loads. We are able to voluntarily say we will meet certain standards. We do get some money back for that. It's not a huge amount, but everything helps. But the other thing that it does is it helps the grid be more stable and make it so that the utility operator, PGM, does not have to turn on a lot of coal and diesel plants for those peak hot days. So we support the overall grid as well as supporting our own budgets. Our main focus lately for projects for energy efficiency has been moving the district more and more to LED and better lighting controls. And as you probably have heard from Mr. Spar, the new building will primarily be LED lighting. Next slide, please. The main focus of maintenance is to try and get it fixed, keep it going without anyone seeing things. When I started off saying you get a peek behind the curtain, if we're doing the best job we can, then all the things we do primarily we get unnoticed because we want to get things fixed before they actually break down or cause an issue with the academic programs. You see other items there, ceiling, weatherproofing. Again, that goes to efficiency, the LEDs that we talked about, and basically just maintaining all of our systems. Next slide, please. Utilities, this is a trend line. I'd like to highlight at the top a benchmarking study done by Pazzo a couple of years ago had the average cost per square foot is $1.09. Again, with some of the shutdowns last spring, last year we were down to 88 cents per square foot. If you compare those two numbers, imagine every 1x1 floor tile and across the entire district having 2 dimes on it. That's what we're picking up through our energy efficiency. And again, you can see from the overall trend line, we've come down, a good 33 cents from school year 13-14. And that's a lot of kudos to Chris Schaefer and his team, as well as a lot of the other aspects that the schools support us in trying to make sure that they don't waste energy as well. Next slide, please. This is the overall utility budget. I just want to highlight on the heating oil. We budget $48,000 for heating oil. The two high schools are on interruptible service. The draw that they have on the gas lines, if there's a very cold winter, PECO cannot support all of the gas for residential use, and they've required us to be able to switch over. They give us a better rate for that, which is good for us all year long. We generally don't want to use heating oil. It's more expensive per BTU, and it's a dirtier system. But we budget for it in support of what PECO demands of us. Next slide, please. This is a look at the overall budget. Looking at a 3-year, the actuals for 2019, what our current budget is and what our proposed budget is. You'll see that there's an increase on the salary and personnel cost. That's approximately 2%, and that's probably in line with the agreements that are out there in terms of escalation of the costs. I don't really know where we stand on the medical aspect. Maybe Vic can answer that, but 2% is actually a pretty good or pretty controlled increase given the current contracts. On the other lines, we are a little bit up, a little bit down. For the overall total expenditure, we're looking for the board to support the operations for next year at $21,268,417. And I will pause at this moment in case there are any questions on any of these specific lines.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Does anyone have any questions about the budget so far or the presentation so far?
Suba, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So, forgive me, Mr. Pitts, kind of in the middle, you have a line, purchase property services.
Yep.
You might just, what is that in a high level explanation?
That's the 400 series in the budget, and that primarily is repairs, contractor support, technical services, and rentals. So it's actually a fairly broad category.
That would include the rental for the relocatable units also included in that at the school.
Okay, thank you, guys.
What is included in the other purchase services?
Other purchase services are primarily insurance and communication. Those are the two. That's the 500 series. So I'd say basically about a little bit more than 1.2 million of it is insurance, and the rest is phones, data lines, and even as mundane things as postage.
Thank you.
With respect, or sort of going back to the purchase property services, so if that includes the modulars, should we expect to see that particular line item then go down after the middle school opens and everyone has transitioned over? I'm sure that there will be a year or two in between the middle school opening and the modulars still being in place for a bit. So, but say maybe 2 or 3 years out, we would expect to see that go down.
Those specific line items certainly will go down when those expenses go away. Hard to say year over year if the overall budget will go down, because basically everything gets more expensive as we go through year to year. But certainly those expenses would go away.
For Marion, Penn Win, and Bow Kinwood, you are correct. We're paying those rents on a monthly basis. I think that's somewhere in about the $20,000 to $25,000 per month range for all three schools, all three units. So that's about a $200,000 to $300,000 expense that won't be incurred once those temporary classrooms can be removed. However, that, as Mr. Pitts said, that some of that savings will possibly be offset by escalation costs and the other things that we do using outside resources.
Thank you.
One last question, or two last questions. What is PASBO for everyone's benefit?
PASBO is the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials. Basically, it's an organization of people like Mr. Lil, Vic, Mrs. Castaneda, and Mr. Vilson. So it covers the non-educational side, and they advocate with the legislature for supporting school funding, and also do a lot of training and instruction for new and changing positions, so that people can get the benefit of others' experience.
Great. And one last question. What considerations are there before we go to an outside purchase property or purchase service?
For the most part, we have a very, very skilled team. All of our HVAC techs are licensed, master plumbers, trained carpenters, master electricians. So we are able to do a lot of things in a house. Generally, where we transition is where we think it's going to be either something that we need a special expertise, or it's just not going to be something that we're going to be able to get done either because of not wanting to impact the school year, or we already have many normal maintenance projects over the summer. So we do look at trying to bring some things in-house, but for the most part, if it's a larger project or more complicated, we generally would work to outsource those items.
That's a
And
really
also-
good, really
Sorry,
good
Mr. Chair.
question, though, because that's an ongoing issue. And sometimes it involves a labor agreements. So, for example, during COVID, we brought in an outside company to help with cleaning. If we were going to do that on a regular basis, then we would have to have a sit-down discussion with the labor union, because you would be, in essence, supplanting their members. But because this was a short-term situation, we brought them in. We made a distinction between security guards and campus aides, to be able to say these folks are not providing the same services as campus aides. So and then it's, you know, which is going to give the best service under the set of circumstances. And I know that George Frazier goes through that, you know, with, you know, when do we bring in somebody outside? When do we do it inside?
And even on the routine day-to-day type issues, I mean, tree removal is a very good example. We have a very, very skilled grounds crew. Handling tree removal is a very specialized task with safety requirements and equipment that really is better for the experts. We also maintain systems that are proprietary, fire alarm systems and building automation systems come to mind. So there are some things that physically really are better handled by outside resources.
Thank you.
Sue, I just one last. I mean, I just want to comment. I think next year, at this time next year, these numbers should be larger, because we would be expecting the new middle school to come online. You may not know those, but nobody should be surprised if what we're seeing in here will be larger next year, because of 200,000 additional square feet of space and another couple acres of, you know, of turf fields you need to maintain. I'm saying that correctly? Yes.
Yeah, I would anticipate there will be some staff increases with another 200,000 square feet. Right now, we have 18 mechanics handling 1.8 million. Not saying that it'll be 2 people, but you know, that is a scale. I do reflect in that first slide the acreage we have now with 1860 Montgomery, but we are not really doing much work there. We're doing some peripheral maintenance in those areas. So that will increase as well. And obviously, heating and cooling and lighting, an additional facility. Although I would say it's going to be a very efficient building, there obviously is going to be more BTUs and more kilowatt hours are going to be used.
And we broke that down. We've estimated that the additional operating cost is about $4 million a year. Now, some of that is administration and it's not on the operations side, but I think we actually have the estimate that we did 2 or 3 years ago. Vic, do we still have that?
Yeah, I'm sure we do. It was, yeah, good 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sure we have it broken out between operations. We also have the educational instructional cost also, in addition to administration. We have that.
So we could actually probably update that for the board if you'd like.
Yeah.
Now, my comment really was just, the budgeting next year is just going to be different because of a new building, I think.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
All right, I will move on unless there's other questions. Next slide, please. Mr. Copeland brought up the security guards. We've done a lot of enhancements with school security. Security guards are one of it. Raptors another. These have some ongoing costs. Right now, we are transitioning to the Alertus program. Those of you who understand what the class system is, it was a panic button that was in the offices, tied directly through the Montgomery County Emergency Management, went right down to patrol cars. If you press that button, a police officer may not know what's going on, but he knew to immediately roll to wherever that button was pushed. That system was being disbanded. It was obsolete, and this being replaced by the Alertus program. So we're kind of ahead of the curve from some other school districts. We have that equipment, bought it actually last year, and are currently going through the process of getting that installed at the schools. Overall, additional investment for security has been about $310,000. So that's a case where over the last several years, we've done a more investment because of a need to focus on school security that adds to the overall budget. Next slide, please.
And that cost did not include the personnel costs that we have, correct?
That includes the security guards.
Yes.
It does. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep. It's contracted services.
Yep. We do a lot of things for cost savings and efficiencies. I've alluded to some of them before. Basically, I just want to highlight that we always are looking for the better mousetrap. We're trying to shave off where we can, focus our staff better, trying to keep the cost under control. We do at the bottom, we do a very aggressive property control. When you approve something for removal from the system, we do our best to sell that and bring that back into the budget for offsetting cost of replacements. Next slide, please. Additionally, we work with the township. They give us a decent rate on trash collection at schools. They support us with bulk items, road salt. And I just want to highlight, we have a tremendously cooperative relationship with the police, fire, and EMS. And that pays us dividends far beyond any cost. There's a lot of combined maintenance efforts for athletics. And they also, I don't know if Mr. Vilson's referred to this, but they support us in roadside service when we have buses down as well. Next slide, please. The bottom line summary for the operations in terms of the general fund is we want to make the best facilities we have to support both the educational and the co-curricular. We're always looking to improve. We make sure that we put a good emphasis on preventive maintenance and proactive maintenance, trying to get things, moving along. Again, this was a peek behind the curtain of operations, but for the most part, we don't want you to know what we do. We want you to show up, do what you're supposed to do, and not worry about the roof, the building, the sidewalks, or whether the snow is going to be cleared or not. That's our goal, is to make it as seamless as possible. And if you do see us, the best thing to do is wave and say thank you for all the things you don't know we do.
Okay, are there any questions regarding Mr. Pitts' portion before I go to the 5-year plan?
Hey, Mr. Pitts, I was just wondering if you could explain how the Alertus system differs from the previous system?
The Alertus system is much more broad and expansive. Let me start with what the class system was. It was simply a panic button somewhere in the main offices of the schools. Again, you press that button, it immediately said, we need everyone, we need the cavalry to run to this school, and we'll find out what it's going to be later. With the Alertus system, you have the ability to have more specific criteria of what kind of problem may be going on. You're able to have remote buttons. So there'll be a panic button in the office, but you can choose certain teachers, various places throughout the building that would have a remote button that could press it and does the exact same thing as the alert button, tells the police officers, move to this building right now. We also have the ability to integrate with our Cisco phone system, our emails, and our PA systems to provide alerts. So if some teacher is on the back side of Harriton, well away from the office, sees something outside that sparks the need to alert the system, not only is that notification immediately going out to the police to respond, but it goes throughout the building, pops up on your phone, pops up on your email. You get a much more widespread and rapid notification that people need to be alert and either perform some action or prepare for some type of response. So again, it's much more integrated, much more broad supportive, and has more points of control.
Thank you.
All right, if there aren't any other questions, just wrapping up this portion, I think we always have taken a great deal of pride in the level of maintenance and the appearance in our schools and our grounds. The grounds, custodial, and building maintenance have always done a spectacular job. I'm always very proud of their efforts. I do have to recognize that I think we're even more appreciative over the past year as things have changed from a full shutdown in March of 2020 to a phased return in hybrid, and now that we're back to in-person instruction. There was a lot of behind the scenes that staff stepped up to the plate to really make a lot of things happen. So certainly very appreciative for those efforts. So most of what Mr. Pitts described really is within the day-to-day annual type of forecasting and budgeting. As a department and even as a district, there's also a need and the obligation to do things on a long-term plan as well. We do have a new middle school being constructed, but in terms of the buildings that we currently have, there is a substantial amount of ongoing replacement and restoration that needs to be done on our existing buildings. Major systems such as roofs, boilers, chillers, control systems, fire alarm systems, things that have a definitive lifespan that need to be replaced or overhauled in a timely fashion. We certainly don't want to replace a roof too soon. We want to certainly get the most out of that initial investment. However, if you wait too long to replace a roof, you have a leaking roof. So what we have is a 5-year plan with projections and specific projects that we do on an annual basis. And they focus on things like life safety, certainly energy conservation. If there's changes in programs, facilities need to be adapted. As I mentioned, there are times when equipment or systems need to be replaced based on end of life and any educational needs. And these are funded through a capital reserve that is within the district funding. And with the 1.8 million square feet that Mr. Pitts mentioned, and our fields, and our grounds, and our playgrounds, we do long-term planning to project, budget, and plan for major projects that need to be done over the next 5 years. So if you look at the bar chart, year one is the year that we're discussing here, the 2021-22 fiscal year. And you can see that we have projections that go out over a total of 5 years. Now, year one is listed with some very close specificity in terms of $4,419,249. And that's based on the fact that we have projects that are going to happen this summer. So that pricing is pretty much fixed. And in some situations, some of these projects in that year one bar have already been approved by the school district, school board. The other projects are out in years 2, 3, and 4. Those numbers are tied to specific projects. As a matter of fact, this bar chart is the sum total of 57 different projects that we have planned over the next 5 years. So each of them is factored into the dollar amount for that particular year. There's escalation. There are estimates. We hope and like to be within 5 or 10% of our estimates when the project actually is priced out and presented to the school board, and getting into the details specifically for projects that will be performed during the 21-22 budget year. If you look at this list, the stadium license Arnold Field at one point was budgeted or allocated for this year. That has since been deferred. You will see a number of projects that are in green font. Those are projects that have already been approved by the school board. So that's how we can say to you that the fire alarm panel at Gladwin is $24,053. Typically, we wouldn't go to that level of accuracy at a project 2-3 years out. I want to point out that the restoration of the home grandstands, the stadium at Arnold Field, those are structural repairs. There's no change to the grandstand footprint or seating itself. This is a matter of a structure that was constructed in the 1950s that needs structural repairs, structural upgrades, and restoration. Moving to the second page, again, green projects have already been approved by the school board. We know that constructing the parking lot at Drayton and Haverford Road will cost $376,672 because we've already opened bids on that project, waiting for township permits and approvals before we bring that to the school board. So you'll see that year one has totaled to $4.36 million. The bar chart shows $4.4 million for this particular year. That is appropriate. Basically, we know that about 99% of those expenditures are locked in or very close. Really, what will happen is once we receive the bids on that Arnold Field Stadium, those structural restorations, if that project comes in at $750,000 or less, we'll move forward with the remainder of the projects in black and take them to the school board for approval. But we really want to make sure that we have a lock on that home grandstands project before we commit additional projects, additional approvals, because we do know that we want to keep it under that $4.4 million that was shown on the bar chart. Moving forward, we have our projects listed here for what I would call year 2, year 3, year 4. I'm not going to go into each project line item by line item. This is something that is somewhat fluid because we evaluate this every year as we put together the budget presentation. And there are times where certain projects will move forward a year, certain projects will move back. If the Gladwin chiller fails prematurely, that would have to move forward. There are times for either budget restrictions or just overall planning that occasionally projects move back. But when you look on the bar chart and see that $4.657 million, that's the result of 12 specific projects that we have estimates on that will become more refined, more defined as we move into that closer to that fiscal year. Year 3, this is 5 projects totaling $4.885. You can see that the Penn Valley roof replacement, and Penn Valley has a substantial amount of roof area. That's $3.6 million right there. So the dollars that we're showing on the bar charts are not estimates. They are physically tied to specific projects. And clearly that one project in year 3 is the major contributor. Year 4 has a extensive list of 19 projects. However, we have estimates for those that come to a sum total of $5 million as shown on the chart. And year 5, you can see that when roofs are involved, Kinwood, a substantial amount of roof area. Gladwin is another building that has a substantial amount of roof area. We are anticipating that in the fiscal year 2025-26, which for practical purposes would be the summer of 2025, that's 4.5 million that would be spent for those roofs as they reach their end of life. And then the other projects are defined, budgeted, estimated, and that's how the chart has the 5.175 shown on the graph that I started with. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the school board?
Yeah, could you go back to the bar chart with the 5-year? So over the course of 5 years, we're projecting what, close to like 18% increase in the cost of capital projects. What's driving that growth?
Well, we do anticipate there'll be some escalation in the upcoming years. Now that would be a single digit type of increase. What's driving the growth is really the projects that we are anticipating. You can see in year 22-23, that's when we hope to be able to put permanent lights at the stadiums. That's a $1 million expenditure. Again, the roof restoration at Welsh Valley, a $1.5 million expenditure. Really what drives it is our forecast of program needs, which the stadium lights would be tied to. And it's also our forecast of when these various items are going to be reaching end of life. And as I said, it's really a sum total of the 19 projects in year 4 or those 7 projects that we have anticipate to do in year 5. So it's really project driven.
And the escalation. If you go to the next year or the year coming up, no, from the details, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you take one of the roof projects and you look back to when that project was first on the, what was it and then what is it now? What was the escalation? Can you just pick one?
I think like the Penn Valley roof replacement. I think that's the first major roof replacement that we have. I know that project that's something I would call year 3. This would really be the 3rd year that this would have been part of the plan. Ken, I know you're in communication with the various roof contractors that do our projects.
I think what Mr. Copeland's referring to is Kinwood, for example. 3 years ago, we budgeted about $960, and that one came in just over $1 million. So
yeah, that's a good example.
Materials and labor do go up, year over year. So when we come up with a 10-year roof plan, we're getting estimates right now. For example, Penn Valley at 3.6 million. When we get 2 years down the road and get to that point, could it be 3.7? Could it be 3.5? It kind of depends on, the cost of tar and the cost of labor.
But I get that. I mean, you can build inflation into that, but that wouldn't explain what 17 some odd percent over 5 years.
Correct. And as I said, the escalation is really a single digit percentage type of increase. I
don't know that over 5 years, I don't know that 17% would necessarily be in some areas out of whack. If we were to go back, the other thing that you just never, I mean, we knew that, for instance, the bleachers in Arnold Field needed to be replaced a few years ago, right, Jim?
Correct.
If we had known there was going to be a pandemic and we were going to have to graduate from there this year, we would have probably moved that into an earlier year, because now we're not going to be able to fill those stands the way we'd like to at graduation. Correct?
Correct. Because the repairs will start the week after the graduation ceremony. So, to Mr. Copeland's point, there are times where projects will be moved forward by necessity. There are other times where projects may be moved back because other needs, other projects will be a higher priority in terms of the dollars and also the availability of resources. I think what I want to focus on is the bars on this chart aren't driven by escalation or driven by rough numbers. It's driven by the 57 different projects that we have identified and the fact that they add up to $24.1 million of anticipated expenditures.
Right. So that's actually, and maybe that's the better place to focus is, do we anticipate that 5.175 is the new normal, or is that a bulge due to the projects? Do we anticipate that that's going to go down after that 5th year, or is that just that escalation that we're talking about? Is that the trend that's going to keep going up? So
I don't anticipate that it will ever go down, but in all fairness, until we really sit down and look at those year 6 projects, which are kind of out there a little further in the crystal ball, what would year 6 look like? Well, year 6 would be 2026, 2027. Harriton High School opened in 2009, so you figure that's 17 years of building systems. The roof is probably going to be in good shape. I mean, that's 15 years in. We should be okay. Any type of automation system, particularly with a lot of the electronics and lighting controls and things of that nature, we're starting to show some of those costs in our projections. 2026, at that point, the new middle school will be about 4 years old. I mean, hopefully we don't have any things that have to replace right away, but maybe 10, 15 years into the life of that building, we'll start to see things, primarily electronics, controls, things of that nature, that eventually will require some long-term restoration and renovation 10, 15 years after that building opens.
But I'm still concerned about the ongoing escalation of costs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I don't know whether roofing costs, to pick one, would go up by, let's say, 15 or 16% over 5 years. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't seem unrealistic to me, given increased labor costs and increased building. But we also know that number is also driven by how much work is out there, how aggressive the bidding is, and the economists who I read seem to be in no agreement at all over the impact of rising national debt and what that means for inflation. So I wish they'd sort of get on the board and agree and tell me one way or another whether that's going to happen or not. But that does concern me 5 or 6 years from now.
And even through great recessions and other economic downturns, I've yet to see the prevailing wage rates for the labor go down one year after another. And we do have to pay the prevailing wage rates by law. And again, I've never seen a year where the wage rates have gone down, regardless of what the economy is doing. And to Mr. Copeland's point, a lot of things are petroleum based. How that market fluctuates over 5, 6, 7 years is variable.
Yeah, I've been burned in operations in years past with sudden spikes and increases.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that, there are a lot of variables.
Yeah.
Just the recent history, the last 10 years of inflation has been very low. And, with the stimulus and all of that, it's certainly unclear what's going to happen to inflation, but, inflation wouldn't, and wage increases wouldn't necessarily explain this. I mean, it looks to me like perhaps the roof replacements are the big ticket items that are driving this 5-year growth. And I'd be curious to see what that looks like afterwards. Maybe without those, perhaps this number is going to flatten out. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's been my experience that what the administration tries to do is and I'll pick on roofs for a minute. You don't want to replace all 15 roofs in a single year because that's a huge So there's a lot of, what I've been witnessing, at least for the larger ticket items, is this staggering out of, we'll do this roof this year, another roof next year, another roof. And then you throw in other things like turf replacement at the Artificial. Those are $1 million projects. We had to do, I know the track at Arnold Field had to be resurfaced. That was a, you know, you don't do it every year, but you do it one every 15, 20 years, but you also don't want your big ticket items landing in 1 year where you have a $20 million budget because you've got 15 roofs you've got to repair that year. So that's been my experience anyway.
And that makes sense. I mean, you want to stagger things out, but that again wouldn't necessarily explain, 17% increase over 5 years.
And if I could, just on the roof program, we have, I mean, there's always a few roof problems everywhere that we stay on top of from a maintenance standpoint. If you were to allow me to have a $15 million spike, I'd fix all the roofs this summer and then be good for the next 20 years. But 20 years down the road, then we'd have another, $15, $20 million spike. So to that point, we do try to spread them out. We try to do the ones that can be restored rather than replaced, although we're going to get into a replacement cycle because of the silicone decisions in the past. But yeah, when we're investing in a roof, we're investing in a roof that's going to last between 25 and 30 years, depending on the system and structure that we do in there. So that is going to go away for a couple of decades. Now, by the time we're done with all of the roofs, we're going to be 10 years away from the next cycle of roof replacement. So there will be a 10-year roof lull, but I can't say that anything's going to go down because are we going to start putting in the current energy buzzword is distributed energy resources? Are we going to start having, trash can nuclear plants in the backyard to support the schools? I don't know what the future brings, so it's hard to say that number is going to go anywhere other than at best flat or more likely steadily increasing. And we don't want to have a spike. That's generally what we're doing. We're trying to plan over the next 5 years, reaching a good maintenance level that we can put in these projects without, as well as support new programs. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
I think Mr. Driscoll raises a good point that year 3, we have this $3.6 million roof replacement. But if you go out to year 5, you can see there's another $2.5 million of roof replacements. We don't want to have a situation where we come to the board with an $8 million spike. Mr. Driscoll is correct. We have to space these out from a fiscal standpoint. The other thing with regard to 2025, 2026, those 2 roofs at $4.5 million is basically what we're spending this year. We're about $4.4 million this year. But we also have to take into consideration things like the lighting control system at Harriton. Again, that was installed in 2009. By the time we get to 2025, that's a 16-year-old system that was cutting edge in 2009. It's starting to show its age. It's not as advanced as it used to be. And you also start to run into issues with product support. So again, everything in these numbers, everything in that 5.175 is really project driven.
We use the term budget for this capital reserve fund, and I just wanted to detail out for others who are watching where the money actually comes from. We budget the general fund annually. How does the capital reserve get funded?
So the capital reserve is from transfers from the general operating fund into the capital reserve. So typically, if there is any type of surplus from the general fund due to not spending all the funds out of the general fund, that will be transferred into the capital reserve fund. It's the only way you can fund the capital reserve fund.
Okay, so it's not that we don't know that these expenses are coming up and that's why we've transferred it in. We know these and we budgeted for it.
Precisely. It is one of the points that confounds me from time to time when the district is criticized for trying to be as efficient as we can throughout the year so that we have a surplus. If we didn't have that, then these projects would have to be budgeted. You wouldn't be able to do them. You'd be forced into a lot of deferred maintenance, because that's generally what happens when you can't afford certain things. And that deferred maintenance ends up costing you way more later on, and you end up having to bond to do the repairs and pay interest on those bonds. So by being efficient through the year, budgeting conservatively, and ending up with a surplus, you're able to take care of projects by balancing them out like this, and without having to borrow money to fix large-scale roof replacements in the future.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any questions from the community? Thanks. I think we can
Actually,
go on.
sorry. Whoops. Can I follow up quickly? Just thinking about these roof replacements, which are big ticket items, and there are, we have a number of buildings. But as we go through them, and we know, that full roof replacement is maybe every 20 years with some restoration in between, are there other large ticket items that are sort of cycled opposite of these? So we have a number of these coming up over the next 4 years. And so, for the following 4 or 5 years, are there other big ticket items that we can expect to come through the capital program? Or is roof replacement really one of those biggest ones?
I mean, roof replacement's a kind of a large ticket item, because, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a restoration, like a recoating, runs close to $8, maybe $10 a square foot. A full replacement down to the deck could cost you close to $20, $25 a square foot. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to have your roof deteriorate to the point that it has to be taken down to the deck, and you've doubled, almost tripled the cost, and you've got wet insulation. To answer the question, roofs are big because there's large square footages, and they have a large dollars per square foot. Chillers, boilers, large pieces of equipment like that, they would also have to be factored in, and we estimate the lifespan. Now, I know in around 2016, 2017, 2018, we did go through a couple of boiler replacements, some predicted, some not predicted. So I think we have a pretty good handle on those boilers, but I can't tell you that every boiler in our schools are, newer vintage. The various chillers, I mean, we're doing a chiller replacement at Penn Wynn, chiller replacement at Gladwin. I know Penn Wynn went through extensive additions and alterations. Penn Wynn would have been the early 2000s, so now we've reached the 20-year mark there. We have to look at really the age of our major systems.
But basically, it's roofs are at the top. Then you start to get to boilers, chillers, those kinds of environmental things. Then you're going to get to, we've had repointing of bricks on certain buildings, and you've had to do some of those. Then you get down to maybe some asphalt replacements and driveways, all the way down to playgrounds. We have people who are certified as playground inspectors, and they'll go around and they'll tell you. I said that may not be the exact order, but I'd say that's kind of the ballpark of where you get that.
Yeah, Mr. Copeland raises a very good point. I mean, we have our 5 of our elementary schools are Class 2 historic resources. Val Kinwood is a Class 2. The district administration building is a Class 1. Now, these are very well and very heavy-duty construction, but they require repointing. They require restoration over the years, and even Harrodson and Lower Merion have masonry that are going to need restoration over the upcoming years. The other thing we deal with, particularly now that control systems and lighting controls, they're electronic, and there's obsolescence in there. And right now we have a control system that the hardware has to be replaced in order for the newest and most efficient control systems to operate for temperature control. So there are the various items that would fall below that type of financial impact of roof, but would certainly be next in line.
Thank you.
So Suba, I'm sorry, this is Ben. I have to drop off. I have another call at this time, but I just want to say thanks to the administration, and I appreciate your time, but I'm sorry I have to run.
Thanks, Ben.
You're going to miss transportation.
I'll get you the replay.
If there aren't any further questions, the yellow buses have appeared. So Mr. Vilsons will now take the stage.
Good morning, everyone. This is what I call is English as a second language part of a budget presentation. It's hard to follow two smooth presenters, so if I butcher some words or sentences, I apologize ahead of time. I will start the next slide. I will start my presentation with a scope of transportation operations. We transport, and again, I caution, these numbers are normal year numbers because I budgeting for next school year to be back to normal school year. We transport 9,000 students every day to school and back home. Ridership is split about 7,800 public school students and 1,000 non-public school students. Of course, this year, these are students that are assigned to buses, but not all of them, more than half of them haven't been riding, although ridership is increasing every day. In our database, we have 9,000 public school students and 2,408 non-public students that we manage, because any of these students may have ability to request the transportation at any time of the year. Next slide, please. We service 123 schools, and we go out in the five surrounding counties. The schools that we service outside are non-public schools within 10 miles from district boundaries, and special needs, specialized schools that don't have a mileage limitation how far we have to go. Next slide. 43 schools are located in Lower Merion Township. 80 schools are located outside of a district. Type of the schools are 10 public, 85 are non-public schools, and 28 are specialized special needs schools. Next slide, please. This year we had 727 daily home to school routes. Usually, for example, in 1920, we had only 577. The difference is because we had elementary school doing split day. So we had to take the students in, take them home, take the new group of students and take them home. So that's increased our number of runs needed. This year, it translated in 83 vehicles providing 151 midday runs. On a normal year, or in 1920, which wasn't normal to the end, but it started as a normal year, we had 23 midday runs and midday buses that provided 42 midday runs. On a normal year, we would have 11 vehicles to provide a community-based work program transportation. That hasn't started this year yet. 8 runs to 2 technical high school programs. This year, we so far had 0 after-school runs, but I believe that may be changing shortly. 18 late buses provide 36 late runs. And in 1920, we completed 227 community-based instruction trips that required 446 buses. Some trips need more than 1 bus. And 799 sports trips with 914 buses used. That is lower because 20 ended abruptly in March. In a normal year, the numbers are probably twice as high because we missed the all spring sports. Next slide, please. In 2020, we had routed 6,110 stops, 2,688 AM and 3,422 PM stops. Question may be why there's more PM stops, because we have these after school programs, we have a late runs, we have special arrangements, split custody, and etc., where students may go to different locations. So that's why there is more stops in the afternoon. Our department basically operates 300 plus days a year. We transport non-public schools even when public schools are closed. We are required to accommodate non-public school calendars and bell times that in a majority cases do not align with our district calendars and bell times. As a result, we have to manage 120 plus different school calendars, early dismissals for 120 schools, and we really only have a normal year, only have 3 to 5 days per year when we do not have buses on the road, because we have a sports trips on the weekends. We operate schools during the spring break. We're gonna have buses on the road during the winter break because non-public schools are going. And each non-public school is actually eligible to the same number of the dismissals as we provide to public schools, which is number 10. So we have to manage 10 early dismissals for 120 schools. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This was I just talking. Sorry about that. Yeah, buses travel 1.5 million annual miles. And on a normal year, I keep saying normal year, maintenance and repair of 178 vehicles are done by our maintenance department. That includes 135 buses and 43 district support vehicles. Next slide, please. This is a split, how our buses are split by categories. I'm not going to go through each item, but as you can see that half of our fleet is compressed natural gas or CNG buses. Next slide. Can you click on the video? I think if you just do next slide, yeah. This is just wanted to show off equipment that purchased 2 years ago, but last winter wasn't as snowy, so we didn't get to use it. This year we were able to use it, and it saved a lot of time cleaning our buses off. And it's called snow scraper system, and it's also prevents drivers from getting injuries while they're trying to get a roofs cleaned with special roof rakes that are long and are difficult on the shoulders and back. So next slide. We also working on implementing a software solution called ByteCurve that will link our routing software with our GPS software. Our GPS software is on our routing software is called BusBoss, but they don't really communicate. And this setting up communication will between them will allow us to effectivize our services to address any issues with latenesses a lot faster. Next slide. This is our staffing. Currently, we have 152 staff members. As you can see, we have 14 open driver's positions and 8 open bus site positions. That's despite that I just looked up that since January of 2019, we have hired 22 new drivers. So we almost hiring driver a month. But we have by natural attrition, by drivers retiring and leaving, we kind of still are very short on that bus drivers positions. Next slide. We have done some things to improve our to make hiring more efficient. One of them was we simplified the initial application process because the talented application for the district is the same application as teachers and principals would fill when they apply for position. And it was difficult for some bus drivers and bus aides to navigate sometimes. And they may not finish it. They may start, not finish it. So we created a website called www.lmsd.org/bus. And there's more simplified application. And once we get a person's information, we kind of reach out to them and work with them to get them in a talented system. kind of move through hiring process. I'm still in we're advertising positions on Indeed and other websites, and we also did a billboard in West Conshohocken on I-76 to advertise our bus driver positions. Next slide. Major elements of transportation budget are salary and benefits, contracted carriers, and energy and fuel. Next slide, please. Significant part of our budget is not a significant part, but large part of our budget is overtime budget. That's due to sports and activity trips, field trips, including nights and weekends, after-school programs and clubs that extend drivers' day, snow removal from terminals and buses. We use our own drivers and aides to remove the snow and prepare terminals, sold them in the mornings. Early dismissals and 2-hour delays, special transportation arrangements for testing days, and emergencies, road emergencies when we have to attend to the bus after the regular mechanic hours. Next slide, please. Our overall budget is actually slightly decreased this year. I estimate to be for 21-22. There are some increases. For example, in supplies, that includes fuel. And we expect that we had really good fuel prices this last IU bid where IU consortium, we expect those prices not be as good. As you can tell at pumps, they have gone up. So a little bit more in the fuel, and also COVID supplies. We have electrostatic sprayers for buses. We spray them twice a day. Drivers have masks. We have masks on buses for students if they forget them. And but overall, it's a slight decrease. I'm gonna follow Ken's example and gonna stop here if anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Sorry, I have a question on actual expenses for this past year. How much lower than budgeted were they? I'm just noticing the big difference between the actual from last year and the budget for 2021.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the year hasn't finished and it's constantly changing the volume of transportation we're doing. But I expect the fuel will be less than budgeted. Maintenance probably won't be because our mechanics went back in early June and started working on buses, because maintenance, regular maintenance and preventative maintenance has to be following scheduled inspections twice a year. I mean, 3 times a year we inspect buses. It's currently, it's really hard to tell. I just know which items, like I said, fuel and probably will be less than budgeted, but the rest of it, and the other one that will be less is a contracted services where we budget. I showed in the previous slides, we budget $2,100,000 for a contracted service. We haven't, many students, special needs students are in virtual mode. So I expect it's probably going to be maybe half of it. So that would be big item where savings. But again, it's picking up. So it's hard for me to prognosticate how it's going to change before the end of the school year. We still have a little bit to go.
Right. We are definitely changing all of the parameters as we move forward. I wanted to also ask, just out of curiosity, I noticed that it said that under staffing that there was 1 full-time bus driver, and then the others. Yeah, I was just curious about that. And I also just wanted to note for those sort of watching that the difficulties of hiring bus drivers is something that's not specific to Lower Merion. It is a statewide issue, and you know, people working across the state trying to improve that, but that is something that's broader than just here.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually a nationwide issue with driver shortages everywhere. And can you repeat your first question? I apologize.
Oh, I was just curious about, there was 1 full-time bus driver and then the rest were not.
Yeah, we have one full-time bus driver position. That is a bus driver that is lead trainer. All bus drivers have to go through lengthy training process when they start. Even if they have all the credentials, we train them our way. We make sure they used to our buses. We make sure they know our district. But the official training can be done by only PennDOT certified instructors. And that one position is a driver that is safety driver. Some of you who've been here for a while may know John Welsh. He's been here probably over 30 years, and he's in the charge of the training all our new drivers.
Thank you.
I have it's sort of similar to what Ms. Klein was asking. I was curious, do you have the total actual expense for the last non-pandemic school year, which I guess would be 18-19? What was the actual expense that year?
I would have to, I don't have it in front of me. I would have to pull it up. Can I get that later to you?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Just to be sure, so you're talking about the 18-19 school year?
Yeah, it's a couple years back, but that would have been the last non-pandemic affected.
Right.
I was just for frame of reference, I was curious about what the actual expense was that year.
Right.
Yeah, I'll
Mr. Lee's,
have it. I
Mr.
just
Lee's
don't
correct.
want
I
to
mean,
spend time digging through the spreadsheets. Right. I'll find it later and get it to you. I don't want to delay the.
Peter, was about around 13.7 million, roughly.
Okay, so 13.7, and so we're proposing 16.4. Do we? So what's driving the bulk of that increase?
I would probably labor costs. We negotiated a new contract that increased the district negotiated new contract that increased the labor rates. Also, I believe in 18-19 we did not budget as much for the. I would have to check the numbers, but I think we overspent. We didn't budget enough for contracted services that kept growing in the previous years.
I think if you go back to those budgets 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't have as much on contracted services, as Mr. Olson said. And then also we have a new collective bargaining agreement. We've had some increases in some other benefits, PSERS and so forth, that's increased over those years. So that's why you see the increase in the budget for this year.
Vic, are those contracted?
So the actual expense is how much we ended up spending. I get your point that we may be using more contracted services now, but we didn't in 18-19. So and personnel costs, yeah, it looks like a little bit more than $1 million, but there's a $3 million difference. So it looks like $1 million of that's coming from salaries. At least $1 million of that is coming from contracted services and a doubling of supplies. What's driving those increases? Go ahead.
Say, if I remember correctly, some of the purchase services was contracting buses for athletics in past years. Like we've had to start contracting more out. Is that correct? I think with enrollment growth.
For the after-school program, not
right. For after-school program.
That's probably that some of it doesn't go in our budget, the contracted services for sports, but Vic can speak to that part of it. I don't think it's reflected here. I think I believe it's a labor cost. We also increased number of our buses, so it's increased maintenance cost. And I believe the gasoline price, but I would have to go back to my 18-19 notes to look at what was the fuel and gasoline prices at that time. There also have been some CNG projects and vehicles purchased. But I will, if I could, I would rather, instead of generalizing, I would look through and find exactly for you what are the main areas of an increase, because I have to look at every item in the budget to make sure.
Okay, thank you. Because, I would expect this number to go up when the new middle school opens, but to go from, 13.5 to 16.5 from 18-19 to now, is just want to understand what's driving that growth.
I will get that information for you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions, community questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, actually, Peter just sort of touched on it. When the new middle school opens, do we have a projection of how that will affect proposed budget? Or are we sure yet?
Transportation budget, it would depend how it is open.
I remember you were talking about a projection of how many more buses you would need, and I'm just curious if that plan has been fleshed out anymore.
At this point, it hasn't. I mean, I know, like, if I have numbers for what would it be if we open up middle school with current bell times and with all grades going to the middle school, instead of transitioning all grades going into the middle school, we're going to need additional buses, approximately, I believe, 14 or 15 buses possibly may be needed. But if it's gradual transition to the new middle school, that spikes the bus requirement for 2 years, because we have to pick up kids in the same area but drive them to 2 different schools. So it's I can't really, until plans are set, I can't really work on exact numbers and the number of buses. We would have to route everything, but we need to know the ground rules before we get into the weeds of it.
And transportation was doing that. They were looking at different scenarios. We had to stop them from doing that in order to reroute the current year going back to full. So they were pulled off of that job, and they'll have to go back to that.
Sounds like that'll be interesting information for the board to make the decision on which strategy they use to move into the middle school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the next slide, I still have a few more slides. This is our school bus replacement plan, which is capital reserve money. It's not really included in this part of a budget, but in 1920, we replaced 14 buses. In 2021, we plan to replace 18 buses. This actually is board approved, but bus delivery will be sometimes in the summer, June or July. And in 21, 22, we would like to replace 18 buses. And the cost is just the estimated cost, what it would cost. Next slide, please. We also try to leverage different sources to get for funding. For example, we work with a grant writer for CNG grants, which basically pays the difference between diesel bus and a CNG bus pricing, which is $25,000-$30,000 difference in the price of a bus. As you can see, since 2011, we have received over $1 million in the grants, and we have another grant submitted to EPA, almost $300,000 grant, and hopefully we get approved sometimes in June or July. There is the IRS excise tax rebate on CNG, so we are able to get a 50 cents back on every gallon of gasoline equivalent. That cuts our CNG costs in half approximately. And annual state subsidy is approximately $2 million plus minus, depending on a year. Next slide. This year we were awarded Environmental Excellence Award by Eastern Pennsylvania Alliance of Clean Transportation. That's because of our CNG program. Next slide. I would really like to thank Interschool Council for recognizing our drivers with a banner. It has been hard year for everyone, and including drivers. They have gone through so many shifts and changes, and that's greatly appreciated that has been recognized by the Interschool Council. Next slide.
So before I move to the next slide, which will open it up for questions, I just wanted to stay on this image for a minute. I want to recognize Mr. Vilsons and his team. I think President Klein had mentioned earlier about the various changing parameters as we transitioned back into hybrid, back in person. A substantial amount of work that Aldis's team did from routing, dispatch, and even the individual drivers. They've done just a fantastic job, and we do appreciate the recognition from the ISC and the community. And I just wanted to include my own thanks for their efforts over the past couple of months. So that does, in fact, bring us to the question slide.
Yeah, and I want to say, yeah, thank you. And yeah, I say we had about 7 first days this year when routes changed and drivers had to do the new route and kids had the different buses. And as you know, first week, usually first day is always really difficult. Kids don't know their buses. So we had 7 this year. Hopefully this was the last first day, which was Tuesday. And I want to thank school board for ongoing support for our department and allowing us to leverage the newest technologies to improve the, to make our safe operation even safer and more efficient. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any further questions? Carol?
That's a clap. I'm trying to figure out how to take it down.
I apologize. Okay, so that concludes our presentation on the operations and transportation. That was very informative. We have 3 additional meetings coming up. April 21st, we'll be discussing the student services budget. April 28th, we'll be doing the staffing and IT budget. And May 12th, we'll be doing the curriculum and instruction budget. And Mr. Copeland, was there anything that you wanted to add at the end?
Nope. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're concluded this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending and asking your wonderful questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.